The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted the way we live. Social distancing and business closures have severely stressed global food supply lines. In Europe, restrictions on movement means farm workers are in short supply, and food is at risk of rotting in the fields. In the developing world, food is available, but increasing poverty means many can't buy it. Whilst in Australia, we have a glut of workers to pick our crops and stock our shelves, at least for now. My family have farmed the land around here for generations, and before I got a job in the media, so did I. So when I heard that COVID-19 is causing problems for farmers, I was concerned. Australian farmers were already struggling. Years of drought had brought many on the land to their knees. And then there was the worst bushfire season on record. So how are they and their workers coping with the pandemic? Morning. Wow. So this is a nice brisk morning. These young backpackers are about to start a day's work picking apples. When did you find out that you were picking here?
Yeah, it's all pretty last minute what farms we get put onto.
Many fruit and vegetable farms in Australia rely on cheap foreign labour to harvest their crops.
Morning. Morning.
Morning. Tim. Yeah. The man who lined up the work for them is local contractor Tim Priest.
So you're the idiot that wore shorts? Like seriously? I got thermals on and everything.
I saw that it was, going to be 20 degrees later, so bought some shorts. See how it goes.
The backpackers are all on 1-year working visas.
4 on each tractor and we'll take you up and get you started.
Doing farm work like this helps them earn their chance to extend their visas for another year. Would you call this the daily commute? And helps farmers stay afloat. So how many workers have you got across, working right now for you?
We've got about 50 on still.
Yeah.
Because we're at the tail end of the season, it's sort of slowed down a little bit.
So why don't you get local Australians to do this job?
They're just not motivated enough, to be honest. Whereas with the backpackers, every day there's work, they'll be at work.
So we're a lazy bunch.
The locals are hopeless, honestly.
Fruit picking is hard labour. It's poorly paid, and yet it takes some skill and care.
They're pretty good, but just be careful. There is a few that are still got a few bruises on them there.
In Australia, finding good workers is a perennial problem. I'd assumed the pandemic would have made things worse for Tim. After all, you can't really work from home as an apple picker.
Well, it was actually positive because before the coronavirus, we were struggling to get enough pickers. And then as soon as the coronavirus hit, I could have been putting on maybe 300 people a day if I had the work for them. Because everyone in Sydney and Melbourne obviously were losing their jobs in hospitality and that sort of stuff. And, basically the next natural step they were taking was to start looking for farm work.
So with a sudden influx of people seeking farm work, Tim struggled to place backpackers in jobs. And then there was a new kind of discrimination.
Quite a few farmers have pretty much told us they only want local people.
Police are cracking down on foreign backpackers accused of spreading coronavirus throughout Sydney's eastern suburbs.
As infections spread across Australia, partying backpackers became national news.
Bondi is a virus hotspot.
We've seen cases among backpackers in recent days, particularly related to parties and so on.
It seems backpackers everywhere were tainted by the actions of a few, and these guys found themselves as good as exiled.
Well, you come with us, Ben, and we'll let these guys go and do their thing.
Bye, Ben.
What are your thoughts about Orange?
It seems like a nice place, I have to say.
And what have the locals been like to you here?
We've mixed reviews. We haven't really met that many. Some have been really nice, but it was like the first day we arrived, we felt like we just walked into some really wrong place, because we kind of like arrived and then someone like said to us like effing backpackers, like because we had all our gear with us.
Wow,
But no, yeah,
that's not very welcoming.
not very welcoming, no.
Ben and his friends first camped on a farm where they were working. But when the pandemic struck, the farmer asked them to leave.
So this is where we arrived after getting kicked off the farm. We just arrived, kind of set up camp, the 8 of us, just in a small circle. This was our humble abode, I have to say.
Orange doesn't have a backpackers hostel, so with nowhere to go, they were given permission to pitch their tents at the showground in town.
And what kind of amenities did you have here?
We had very little, I have to say. We just had running water, no toilets, no shower. Kind of like leaning under these taps just to kind of get a little bit of a water shower going. And then we'd have about half an hour walk into town to go to the toilet, or we'd take the car if there was enough of us, really.
That's dire.
Yeah, very disappointing.
Ben says some locals tried to scare them off by honking their horns and yelling verbal abuse as they drove past. One morning, they woke up to find their water had been cut off. Farm contractor Tim came to the rescue and found them a house to share.
I must say, after a hard day picking apples and having to come back, camp here and wash under that tap.
Oh, horrendous.
This treatment was enough to make some of the backpackers consider going home. And if Australia runs low on backpackers, farmers will struggle to pick the next crop of fruit and veg. Germany also relies on foreign workers to get its food out of the fields and into the supermarkets. But it doesn't have a ready supply of willing backpackers. Each year, around 300,000 seasonal workers from Eastern Europe come to Germany. But as COVID-19 kicked off, the government banned all seasonal workers from entering the country. Farmers were left to watch their crops and livelihoods wither in the fields. I can't go to Germany, so a local filmmaker is filming the other end of this phone call.
Good morning from Germany.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Jan is an asparagus farmer.
So how has COVID-19 affected your operation?
In diesem Jahr aufgrund der Corona-Pandemie ist es für uns extremst herausfordernd. Ja, das Gleiche ist mit unseren Saisonkräften, war lange nicht klar, ob wir überhaupt in diesem Jahr eine Ernte gewährleisten können.
Each year, Jan relies on Romanian workers who in the lead up to this harvest weren't allowed in. But facing backlash, the government did a backflip and opened the borders.
Es war kein Bustransfer über die Grenzen zu Ungarn und Österreich nach Deutschland möglich. Wir hatten nur die Möglichkeit, die Leute per Flugzeug einzufliegen. Und das ist natürlich ein ganzes Flugzeug chartern, kostenmäßig eine ganz andere Geschichte, als wenn Sie mit dem Bus fahren.
Jan chartered a plane for his workers at a huge personal cost. An extreme measure for unprecedented times. But he's still vastly understaffed.
Normalerweise 350 Leuten, in diesem Jahr 200 Leute weniger. Und das ist für uns, wir müssen auf weniger Fläche in diesem Jahr ernten. Wir können nicht die Gesamtfläche ernten.
Are you stressed?
Ja, also jeder Tag ist für uns sehr anstrengend, für mich besonders sehr anstrengend. Wenn wir nicht ernten können, haben wir keine Einnahmen. Und keine Einnahmen bedeuten für unsere Company nach 2 schwierigen Jahren mit Dürre und Trockenheit das Ende.
So why not Germans? Why use Eastern Europeans and Romanians to do this work?
Das ist eine sehr harte Arbeit, das ist eine sehr körperlich anstrengende Arbeit. Für die Deutschen ist die Motivation nicht die gleiche wie für die Rumänen. Und die Motivation heißt Geld. Die Deutschen wollen nicht unbedingt diese harte Arbeit machen.
Even the Romanians agree that picking the humble asparagus isn't for everyone.
E muncă grea, e muncă foarte grea, dar cei care sunt obișnuiți și majoritatea la țară să muncească.
Anton is the Romanian supervisor on the farm. After arriving by plane, Anton and his co-workers are in 14 days of quarantine. The Romanians work the field and must remain distanced from other farm workers. But some of the new rules are apparently hard to follow.
Wie gesagt, wir müssen gucken, dass alle Leute ihre Maske im Bus aufsetzen. Wir dürfen arbeiten und ihr dürft Geld verdienen, wir dürfen Geld verdienen und das dürfen wir nicht riskieren, weil wir im Bus sitzen und keine Maske aufhaben. Ne?
The workers are being housed in an isolated old army barracks. For quarantine reasons, our filmmaker can't go inside, so Anton meets him outside.
Wie letztes Mal.
He gets instructions for putting on a microphone himself.
Genau auf die Seite or in the back here. How is it to live here?
Ei, condițiile îs cum îs. Deci nu sunt nici rele, dar nici prea bune. Pentru unii probabil sunt mai bune ca acasă, pentru alții nu.
Why do you come to Germany for this work?
Ca să ajutăm agricultura nemțească, să nu pentru bani în primul.
What's the money difference like between Romania and Germany?
Ca să nu exagerez. Dublă, triplă, de ce? No.
Anton and his colleagues are feeding Germany, but this work also helps them feed their families back in Romania.
How do you feel now that Germany sees the Erntehelfer as so important?
Crește inima. Mândria de a fi român lăudat, că de regulă nu prea am fost. Bye, bye.
Back in the apple orchard, I meet the boss.
So, how many acres do you run here?
250 acres of apples and cherries.
Fiona Hall has worked this property in New South Wales for 20 years.
And how would you describe the season this far?
It's been tough because we've had big water issue problems, enough water storage. Our bores went dry, and beginning of this season we actually ran out on this farm of water. And then you throw COVID on top of all that and it's been pretty tough. Yeah, it hasn't been easy.
In the packing sheds, social distancing is another headache to contend with.
So what have we got in here?
Packing pink ladies today.
And how many people do you have like working in this space now?
Around 20 is here today. It's usually our apples. Come cherry time in our cherry shed, we probably put about between 70 and 90.
70 and 90?
Yeah.
Wow. Is it possible to enforce social distancing in...
Impossible. Impossible. It's a very tight shed. People have to work close together.
Do you think we've truly felt the effects of COVID in operations like this?
I think the effects of COVID is still to come for us as far as labour that we'll require in a few months' time.
Fiona needs up to 90 workers come summer harvest, but she's concerned backpackers will have left by then, with no new arrivals to fill their places.
Yeah, treat them like eggs, otherwise we don't get paid.
Apple season ends in a few days, and so does the work for now. These guys are only making around $70 a day, And with no jobs in the cities and limited farm work available, they're facing some tough decisions.
I've had thoughts about going back home, and we haven't been able to save up money at all, really. As of right now, things are looking pretty grim.
So if I have to go and if I don't find another job, then I will go home. But I don't really want to go home because I think in Germany the situation is way worse than it is here.
This kind of fruit picking work, would you do this in Germany?
Probably not, no.
Almost a third of all backpackers have left the country since the start of the coronavirus outbreak, a concerning statistic for Fiona.
The season's almost over. Are you worried that you won't get these workers back later in the year?
Yes, worried that these guys will go, but also the ones that were due to come in will not be available. So our biggest worry will be going into the next crop. It could be really scary. I mean, there'd be nothing more devastating than having a beautiful crop of cherries and you can't get them harvested.
Getting fruit off the tree is only half the problem. Once picked, it needs to be sold. But the pandemic has disrupted global freight and supply lines. And that's a big concern for producers like Fiona.
If we don't have an export market for our cherries, and come cherry season, if we don't export into China or into Southeast Asia, our normal markets, then we're going to have a very flooded domestic market, and it'll be a disaster.
Australia's concerns are not about food security. We produce more than we consume. But the World Food Programme predicts that 265 million people could be pushed to acute food insecurity because of COVID-19. But it's about access to food and the ability to buy it rather than farming.
I think there's enough young farmers out there who wouldn't want to work on a farm.
Associate Professor Alana Mann is a key researcher at the University of Sydney's Environment Institute.
I think that a lot of people who are already living in countries where food insecurity is a major problem, they're going to be the big victims of COVID. What's happened in countries like, for example, the Philippines, there's been a serious crackdown under the guise of social distancing on everyday vendors and the informal economy. So the fresh food markets, for example, and using this as an opportunity to really crack down on freedoms.
Richer nations are less likely to go hungry. But COVID has exposed some cracks in the production process, meaning some food is going to waste as it gets stuck in the supply chain.
I think what COVID has really exposed in terms of global food chains is the fact that they are not very resilient and that they're also very much geared around this just-in-time ideology that really means that you don't want to be able to, or you don't want to have to store food for a long time. You want the food to come from the port, go directly to the supermarket shelves and then to the consumer. When you have a very long and complicated supply chain like that, it's very easy for things to go wrong.
Australia really is the lucky country when it comes to food. But if farmers' livelihoods are continually put under strain, will we always be so lucky?
Would it be easy for Australia to become complacent?
I think complacency is a major factor because I think that aside from everybody's panic over toilet rolls, I didn't hear the same panic around foodstuffs. You know where Australia does have a problem? Not so much in our farms, but in our supermarkets. They are actually bringing prices down, 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 as they like to say, but that also brings farmers' income down. That farm gate price that the farmers get is what will enable them also to be resilient in difficult times. They also need to have savings so that they can weather COVID or the drought or whatever the next crisis is.
Like Australia, England is a prosperous country. But food-wise, it only produces half of what it consumes. It's not only reliant on food imports, but also foreign labour. And before the pandemic, Brexit was already causing labour shortages from Europe. Now coronavirus travel bans have made the situation critical.
But one thing is clear, and that is that this year we will need to rely on British workers to lend a hand to help bring that harvest home.
This is why that great movement of the Second World War, the Land Army, is being rediscovered in the newly created Pick for Britain campaign.
Pick for Britain is an initiative to get everyday Brits working on farms. During World War II, when men went off to war, 80,000 women were recruited to work on farms, and the Women's Land Army became a source of national pride. Now, the National Farmers Union says 70 to 80,000 workers are needed to harvest the country's crops, filling the gap left by European workers. If the gap can't be filled, homegrown fruit and vegetables risk rotting in the fields, and farmers risk going bust.
Not as hot as last week, but it's certainly going to be warmer.
Okay. Well, better than rain.
Better than rain.
Again, we've got a local filmmaker covering this for us.
Morning, Will.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for taking my call. British asparagus farmer Bruce Kerr is giving local workers a go.
It all came about with a tweet that we put out on Twitter asking for people to help, and within a matter of hours, or probably even minutes, we had a huge response to that. You know, we thought we might get 20 or 30 responses, and we ended up with over 300 in that initial week. Wow. And it was like, okay.
So what kind of people did you get from that call out?
We've just got a very broad mix of people, but some of them have been furloughed from their jobs. We've got 2 chefs, we've got some students, so there's a real variety of guys we've got working for us.
Are they cutting the mustard?
Yeah, no, they're going really well. Really good team spirit, and it's working really well.
Is it just about people finding jobs, or are there bigger motivations at play?
I think there is a great sense of people wanting to help the country, wanting to help the nation, and particularly if they're unable to go back to their normal day-to-day work and lives.
You a fan of asparagus?
Yeah, I love asparagus. It's really good, but did make your peas stink.
What's the best thing about the job, and what's the worst thing about the job?
The worst thing is the early mornings, definitely. The best thing, I think, is being outside. And when it is sunny, you can get a tan.
Bruce's concern now is that once the lockdowns end, his workers will go back to their normal jobs. But for the moment, he's grateful. And what would it mean for you if you couldn't get those workers?
We would have probably taken the decision that actually some of the fields we just wouldn't pick at all this year, and we'd have left them to grow on for next year.
Well, lucky the Brits have come through, mate.
Yeah, surprised even you Aussies, I expect.
One of the Brits that answered the call to work was Jason.
So, Jason, how long has your asparagus picking career lasted so far?
I think it's about 3rd week in now. Yeah, so good tough 3 weeks.
Does it make you like asparagus more or less?
We respect it more. I've cooked enough of it, so.
Jason is a local chef and father of 3 who lost his job due to the pandemic. As a new asparagus picker, he's expected to walk up to 6 kilometres in a day and bend over around 20,000 times.
It took about 3 or 4 days for the body to recuperate and realise, hang on a minute, there's different muscles being used here. So the bottom part of the back gets really there, and underneath the top part of the legs, underneath the cheeks, that's the real sort of bit why we get up and we just have a little stretch and then carry on. But I never thought I'd ever be in the field gathering this lovely crop. Never. but I'm very thankful for it, very thankful.
For the money or for the experience? Or?
I think both. You know, there is uncertainty coming.
With Britain still figuring out how Brexit will impact labour shortages, at least the pandemic has given Jason some faith in his country's motto: keep calm and carry on.
Experiencing this has proven to me it doesn't matter where you are, who you know, and what age you are. If it's needed, I think the Brits will come together and get us through the Brexit, no problem. Oh, good save. This is nice winding down after the old asparagus picking. Nice to be upright.
Jason is thankful to be earning a wage and helping his country. But asparagus picking doesn't pay as well as Jason's old job as a chef.
Yes.
His wife is also out of work.
With the help of people that we know and we rent through, they've given us grace periods. Otherwise we would be, we'd be quite well in debt, without a doubt. You know, it's that raw. We focus on the children, making sure they're okay. Food on the table, but the little luxuries that you're used to aren't there anymore. So it's really, it makes you really appreciate the smaller things in life and what counts in life and what's important. Wait. Well done, superstar.
It's not just apples from Orange and asparagus from Europe that has felt the brunt of the pandemic. Wool growers are hurting from a fashion industry spooked by recession. And Australia is now going into battle with China over barley tariffs and bans on meat exports. Coronavirus is impacting us in so many ways, big and small. And we'll continue to feel it at home, at work, in our wallets, and on our plates.